Good evening and welcome to the Reform Alliance for our town hall meeting. We're glad you're joining us this evening. We have a great discussion this evening. We will be talking to Dr. Patrick Wolf, Distinguished Professor and Endowed Chair in School of Choice at the University of Arkansas, along with Julie Trivitt, who is Education Economist at the University of Arkansas. We're going to discuss this evening why educational options are best for our families, our communities, and the future of Arkansas. We are really giving you, we're glad you're joining us tonight. Just give us a few more minutes and we will get this conversation started. Again, this is Valerie Pruitt with the Reform Alliance. We're happy that you're joining us this evening, along with Lori Lee, who is the chairman of the Reform Alliance Board. Lori, we're glad to have you here also this evening.
Well, thanks. We're dialing out to several thousand Arkansans right now, so we're just going to wait a few minutes for people to join in the call, but we're very excited to have Dr. Patrick Wolf and Julie Trivitt on the call, probably two of the most knowledgeable people in the nation with regard to school choice programs, information, and funding, and they are both right here in the fine state of Arkansas. So just really appreciate both of you joining us this evening. And again, we're dialing out to several tens of thousands of Arkansans, so we're just going to give a few minutes. At any time, if you guys have any questions, those for you calling in, if you want to push the 0 on your keypad, you will be directed to one of our screeners, and they will be able to take your questions. And then Dr. Wolf and Julie will be sure and answer those on the call.
And we're hoping to get everyone's question in tonight, but if we do not get your question, we ask you to email us at info@thereformalliance.org. And you can also call us at 501-244-9028. But we're hoping to get all those questions answered. We have a great discussion. Again, I'm Valerie Pruitt, and I have Lori Lee with me, along with Dr. Patrick Wolf and Julie Trivitt, and we're looking forward to a great discussion tonight.
So, Julie and Patrick, just so you know, we're calling out to homes and inviting people to the call. So it's just going to be a few more minutes. But if you guys want to go ahead and maybe introduce yourselves, Patrick, we'll start with you and let some of the folks that are already on the call kind of know who you are and what you do.
Sure. Thank you, Lori. So I've been evaluating private school choice programs for the last 20 years. I'm a professor at the University of Arkansas in the Department of Education Reform, and basically I have made it my job to know what happens to students, families, schools, and communities when parents are given more options about where to send their child to school.
So you're not working just out of theory. You've actually studied this for more than 2 decades.
Yes, ma'am. It's my job.
And not just programs in the state of Arkansas, but nationally. You have a national scope of what happens when these programs are implemented in states.
That's correct. I've done long-term studies of the Opportunity Scholarship Program in Washington, D.C., of the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, of the Louisiana Scholarship Program down in the Bayou. I've also been involved in a study of private school choice in Delhi, India. So even internationally.
Excellent.
And you're right here in Arkansas.
That's right.
Julie, give us a little your background, Judy, while we still are getting these calls in.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on tonight. I have a PhD in empirical economics, and that means I look at, the mathematical relationships, and I have been studying education issues. So I don't have quite as much, I don't have anywhere near as much experience as Patrick does on the school choice issues, but I've looked at a few school choice programs as well as some different education reforms and school finance issues. In Arkansas, I'm at the University of Arkansas. I teach in the economics department there.
So you know all the numbers and and the reasons that this works for states and families and schools and those kind of things.
Yes, recently I've been looking at some of the different school finance formulas in Arkansas and Louisiana. I'm looking at what happens when we give students the option to have a scholarship, perhaps paid for by tax dollars, and what the net effect to the state is.
Great. Well, good evening again to those folks who are just joining us. Thank you for joining the Reform Alliance for our live town hall meeting. Again, I'm Valerie Pruitt, Director of the Reform Alliance, and with me is Lori Lee, the Chairman of our board. Let me tell you a little bit about the Reform Alliance in case you don't know about us. We are a nonprofit organization. We are dedicated to education reform here in Arkansas. We are dedicated to supporting school choice opportunities for all students in Arkansas. We strive to raise public awareness of all types of education options for families, including public schools, charter schools, magnet schools, online learning, private schools, and homeschooling. And in addition, we're proud to promote the Succeed Scholarship Program. Again, tonight our panelist for our town hall meeting is Dr. Patrick Wolf, who is the Distinguished Professor and Endowed Chair in School Choice at the University of Arkansas, and Julie Trivitt, Education Economist at the University of Arkansas. Now, tonight we're going to discuss why educational options are best for our communities, our families, and the future of Arkansas. For example, being talked about now is something called a tax credit scholarship. And with that, we want to bring in Julie and Patrick to discuss that this evening. And before we get into questions, if you have any questions, again, for our panel, you need to press 0 on your phone keypad. And if you are unable to get your question in, you can email us at the info@reformalliance.org or call us at 501-244-9028. Before we get into our questions, we want to ask a polling question to our listeners tonight. Do you have a child in K through 12 schools? Press 1 for yes, 2 for no. Again, do you have a child in K through 12 schools? Press 1 on your keypad for yes and 2 for no. Okay, let's get into the questions. Julie and Patrick, again, thank you for being our guests this evening. The first question we want to ask is, and I'll just let you or Patrick decide who wants to answer this, and both of you can jump in. Why is school choice important to our students, our communities, families, and teachers?
So I'll start. So school choice basically means that parents can choose from a variety of different schooling options for their child and receive support from the government in the form of resources to enable them to choose a particular school for their child. And basically what this does is it really frees up the education system and allows students to be in schools that are a good fit for them. It allows teachers to be in schools that are a good fit for them. And pretty much everybody sort of ends up in a situation that they want to be in, and that really accelerates the opportunities for students to thrive and teachers to be satisfied and free to teach in the kind of environment that they want to be in.
Again, I want to remind our listeners, if you have any questions, you need to make sure that you push 0 on your telephone keypad. And we have people that will be answering the phone to take your question. And we hope to get to all your questions this evening. So just remember, press 0 on your keypad if you have a question, and someone will put your question in the queue. Lori?
So we've been talking to a lot of people on social media lately, Patrick and Julie, and of course one of the hot buzz things right now, because it's most likely going to be coming before the legislature, is a program called a tax credit scholarship. Wondering if that is a value add to our state with regard to our universe of education. If that helps our families and communities and teachers and schools, and if so, why do you think that is?
So I'll start with sort of the effect that tax credit scholarships programs have on students and schools, and then Julie can follow up with a discussion of how they work in terms of finances and what effect they have on the fiscal effects that they have on the state and school system. So tax credit scholarships are one mechanism by which government policy can support parental school choice. And basically we know from a wealth of research that under many circumstances, private school choice has a positive effect on student achievement, but it's even more consistently, it has a positive effect on how long students stay in school. That is, how far they go in the education system in terms of high school graduation rates being higher, college enrollment rates being higher, persistence in college being higher, and even graduation from college being higher. There was a recent study of the tax credit scholarship program in Florida that found that students who participated, who attended private schools through that program, had a 60% higher likelihood of obtaining a college degree than similar students who did not access private schooling through that program. So we see some very strong positive effects on student educational attainment, on things like reducing their likelihood of committing crimes, reducing teen pregnancy, those sorts of things. And so tax credit scholarship program is just one model for giving parents more choices, including private school choices, that result in positive effects on students.
Excellent. So we've got several questions in the queue here, but in that vein, Patrick, I want to talk to you. Today came out a thing from the AAEA, which is the Administrators Association, and in their talking points, they kind of said directly what you just said isn't true, that there's no sign that these programs improve student learning, and in fact, there's reason to believe that they harm student achievement. And so, in the political climate we are in today, you've got the he said, she said. So is there a specific place where folks could go and get some more objective information so they could see for themselves some of the things that you are talking about and speaking of, and maybe ask questions of people that know?
Sure. So I have a research center called the School Choice Demonstration Project, SCDP, at the University of Arkansas, and Dr. Trivitt is on my team for that center. And if you go to our website, you'll find that we have lots of research that we've done on the effects of school choice, and we have one page where we talk about summaries of the effects of school choice. And there you can find what we call a meta-analysis, and that's just a systematic summary of the evidence from all the rigorous evaluations. The document that you were referencing was very selective in the studies that it mentioned and that it emphasized, and I think it's important to see the whole picture, the big picture. And so at our research center, we've got these comprehensive summaries of the evidence on school choice, those are much more positive than these very selective reviews that sometimes circulate.
So that's kind of what we found, that, you know, people pick and choose the facts that they want to use. So I was glad to hear you say that. And can you give us that website one more time so folks can visit that and get that information?
Sure. If they just Google SCDP, it will come up as one of the top choices. It's the School Choice Demonstration Project at the University of Arkansas.
We will find that and put it on our Facebook pages and tweet that out. So, Dr. Trivitt, I think this is a great question for you. This is a financial one, and it comes from Marla in Hot Springs. And Marla says, how are you going to move the kids to the school that they want to go to without any financial impact on the school they are leaving?
Okay. Well, if we're talking about one of the tax scholarship programs, a taxpayer or donor makes a contribution to a scholarship fund, and the donor gets a tax credit in exchange for that donation. So basically, the taxes they pay are offset. Now, when a child moves to a private school, that reduces the number of students at the public school. And so typically that school needs less funding. The effect on the public school is exactly the same as if, the family moved to a different town, or they went to private school and they were paying the tuition rather than using the tax scholarship program to pay for it. So it doesn't harm the school. The school still gets money based on the number of students, but they do have one fewer student enrolled when a child transfers. Now, the whole funding formula is based on what the school needs to cover all the expenses they're going to incur in educating the child. So when you have one fewer student, you need one less copy of the textbooks, and the teacher needs to make one less copy of every worksheet and every exam and all of those other little variable expenses that add up throughout the year. So when I do an analysis of the districts within the state, the fiscal effect on the district, based on the most recent data that we have, is that on average they're not harmed when one student leaves, because any difference in funding is completely offset by a difference in the cost they incur.
I know you're going to find this as a surprise, but we hear the direct opposite from the union, of course, about these types of things.
Right.
So let me ask you this, and either you or Patrick, would you be able to say that the taxpayers of Arkansas's return on investment for a K-12 education would be better used for a child who's struggling in their zone school to be able to go to a school that better fits their needs so that they can get an education at the end of K-12, which would make them a productive tax-paying citizen?
So I'll start out. I did a benefit cost analysis of the effect of the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program based on the fact that program increased the likelihood of college or of high school graduation by 21 percentage points, and that was an increase of almost 35% in the likelihood of someone graduating from high school if they participated in the choice program. Yeah, it's a huge effect, and of course, high school graduation makes a big difference in the life of a young person in the inner city compared to dropping out of high school. So when we priced out all of the benefits for those extra, I think there was an extra 321 students who graduated because of that program, and divided it by the cost of the program, we determined that the return on investment was $2.62 for every dollar that was spent on it. So that's a big return on investment. And that's only based on the fact that it boosted the high school graduation rate. So again, we have consistent evidence that these programs they keep students engaged in the education system longer, get a higher number of them through to high school graduation, college enrollment, and college graduation. So that's the benefit side. And as Julie mentioned, the fiscal effect for districts is a wash. They lose costs that are proportionate to the amount of funding they lose. But, there's also the question of, how does it affect the state's finances? And Julie, maybe you can quickly, because that's kind of the cost side. In the long run, do these programs cost the state, or do they benefit the state fiscally? So maybe Julie can chime in on that.
No, in the long run, these programs save the state money because the way the funding formula is set up, typically it's less expensive to finance or help pay for a scholarship than it is what the state's obligation to fund the schools above what the district is doing. So yeah, the state spends less money to have a student who has chosen a school where they are performing better and more likely to graduate. It's a win-win.
And so, Dr. Trivitt, so you just recently did a pretty quick fiscal impact on the Succeed Scholarship, which has about 250 students in it right now. And you found already, after the program's been in effect just right at 2 years, only one full school year, that would have been the, 17, 18 school years, the only school year that program completed. And do you remember what you found?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the total effect was a savings of about $330,000. It was about $1,100 per student, if I remember correctly.
And that is an $1,100 per student savings on top of educating 250 kids in an environment that is more satisfying to their parents and a better fit for the student.
Correct.
So that's like that win-win you're talking about. And we've got some more questions coming in, but I do have one more audience that we sometimes negate in the school choice conversation, and that's teachers. So I know that a lot of talk about teachers, and the union stance and the AAE stance is, well, this will cost teacher jobs. And so can either one of you kind of speak to that assertion?
So I'll start, and then Julie can add to it. Basically, what school choice does is it just sort of frees up more opportunities for teachers to choose the school sector that they'll teach in. It doesn't necessarily reduce the number of total teaching jobs because if the private sector expands, if there are more private schools because that's what parents are choosing, then those private schools are going to need teachers, and they can hire teachers that previously were in public schools. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there will be fewer teachers or fewer teaching positions. It just means teachers will have more options about the kind of school that they will teach in.
Yeah, he's exactly right. As long as we are still educating the same number of students and we have the same average class size, we need the exact same number of teachers. All it does is perhaps allow them to opt into other types of schools,
which would work. And I'm not an economist, but would work in what I learned in junior high and high school, the supply and demand. If there is a greater demand for teachers, then wouldn't that give teachers an opportunity to have better paying jobs and better environments and more benefits?
Well, if the market for teachers becomes more competitive because there are more employment opportunities outside of just the public district school, then yeah, it could allow teachers to have, be able to choose the one that has the right combination of working conditions and job responsibilities and things and benefits that are most attractive to them.
Excellent. Well, we have some more questions that come in. I'm gonna let Valerie share with you some of these questions that have come in from our audience.
Okay, we have a question from Conway. Private schools do not have the same oversight and accountability as public schools. Why should they receive public funding?
Okay, so I'll take that. Private schools are accountable to parents as customers. So if they aren't delivering an effective education for a child, then the parent has the option to take that child out of the school, and the school loses those resources. That's called high leverage accountability. That's what economists call it, when you basically can vote with your feet to leave one provider and go to a different provider. Whereas, the accountability system that we built for a public school monopoly is a lot more complicated, and actually, economists argue that that's lower leverage accountability because you've got all these rules and regulations layered on, and they really sort of constrain the ability of teachers to teach the way they want, principals to lead the way they want. But the reason you have to do it is, in the absence of school choice, all the students have to be in a particular school, and they don't have a choice. They don't have an option, and so you have to build in this alternative form of accountability that's very hierarchical and very rule oriented. It's not more accountability. It's different accountability than private schools face through parental choice. And the other thing I'll add is that all of these programs have accountability mechanisms built in on top of the high leverage accountability that comes from parental choice. So there are requirements, certain requirements about the private schools operating in ways that are consistent with state laws, and in many cases, they require certain certifications and accreditations. They require reporting to parents about the performance of students and things like that. So it's really misleading to say that a public school system without school choice has more accountability than a broader education system that is driven by parental choice.
Excellent. So I don't know if you and Julie are aware of this, but recently our team went on a state tour during National School Choice Week a couple of weeks ago, and what we found when we talked to parents and teachers and students around the state was not only the things that you shared about kids staying more engaged and teachers finding better places that really suit their needs, but the communities at large were very excited about school choice. I mean, we visited one where in Morrilton, the private school and the public school work hand in hand to make sure each and every student is getting what they need from that school district, whether that's being at a private school, a public school, a combination, tutoring, all of these things. And so that's kind of education universe, if you will, that we would be very excited to see is not just an education system to educate all students, but an education system to educate each student.
We want to also remind those listening, if you have any questions for the panel during this discussion, press 0 on your phone keypad, and we'll have your question answered. Another question from one of our listeners, Patrick and Julie. This is from Nicole. She lives in Pine Bluff. She asked the question, how can this program help the most disadvantaged population of students? Aren't they the ones left in public schools?
That's exactly why we need this program. If you don't have any sort of school choice programs that are funded partially by taxpayers, then you end up with the most advantaged students having options, because those families can afford the private school tuition, and those families can afford to move, to take those transaction costs to get a house in a nicer neighborhood with better schools. And so programs like this frequently target the more disadvantaged population as a way to make sure they have alternatives too. And every student can find a school that matches what they need as far as the curriculum and all of the different things that go into a good educational system.
And that was an excellent point, and I'll just add to it that there is a wealth of research that when private school choice programs are launched or expanded, the public schools in the area actually deliver better achievement results for the students who remain in those public schools. So the non-choosing students actually benefit. And it's easy to understand why. It's basically the students who didn't want to be there have left the school, and so the school can really focus on educating the students who want to be there, the students who are a good match for what that school is offering. And we see that test scores actually go up in traditional public schools when they face competition from school choice.
And wouldn't that also then be a bonus to teachers, that they would actually have, we talk to teachers every day, literally every day, that have students in their classrooms that they know are not being served properly, that they have no options. The parents can't afford the therapies they need, they can't afford the tutoring they need, they can't afford private school tuition, and so therefore a teacher has to sit and watch a child languish in a classroom because they have 27 more students to educate. And so we've really set up a conundrum for our teachers that could be solved by teachers being allowed to help families and students find solutions to those students that aren't a good match for their own public school.
Lori, we've done surveys with parents who run the Succeed Scholarship Program, and a number of parents have said that the teacher has actually said to them, I'm so sorry, but, I really can't help your child.
We do that every day. And what a horrible place to be if you're a teacher and your passion is to teach students, is to have a student that is forced to stay in a classroom because of financial reasons that you can't do anything to help. And so I just don't understand the deal. But we do have some more questions, so we're going to move on.
Right. Joyce from Little Rock, why would you want to promote discrimination with these programs?
Well, the programs don't promote discrimination. Every private school in the state of Arkansas is required by law to adhere to the state's anti-discrimination laws. They cannot discriminate against students based on race or ethnicity, or they can only discriminate based on gender if they are a single-gender school, but otherwise they can't discriminate in admissions based on gender. So basically they're subject to the same anti-discrimination rules and laws as traditional public schools. And there've been several studies that show that oftentimes with these private school choice programs that are targeted to low-income populations of students, they actually have a positive effect on the racial integration of public schools, because a lot of times what happens is that students of color who are in zoned public schools that are overwhelmingly students of color, so these are homogeneous, almost fully segregated zone public schools, use the scholarship to leave and go to a private school that has a better ethnic mix and racial mix of students. So as long as these programs are targeted to more disadvantaged kids, and every proposal we've seen for Arkansas is for a private school choice program targeted to more disadvantaged kids, we see the opportunity to actually promote greater racial integration through parental school choice.
If you're just joining us, this is the Reform Alliance. This is our town hall meeting with Patrick Wolf and Julie Trivitt, the University of Arkansas. And if you have any questions for the panel during this discussion, please press 0 on your phone keypad. And if we're not able to get to your question tonight, you can email us at info, thereformalliance.org. And you can also call us at 501-244-9028. We have another question that came in from Mary and the Queen. And her question is, if school choice is about giving parents the best options for their own child's educational needs, why does the conversation seem to be so partisan and so divisive?
Well, I just wrote a book chapter about that, so I'll start out with my response. The interesting thing is, it's not that partisan at the state and local level. It's much more bipartisan traditionally at the state and local level. The very first school choice program that was enacted in Milwaukee was that effort was led by Dr. Howard Fuller, who's an African-American man who was part of the Civil Rights Movement and was the superintendent of public schools in Milwaukee at the time, and Polly Williams, who was an African-American woman legislator from the city of Milwaukee. They led the effort, and they were both Democrats, and they partnered with Tommy Thompson, the governor, the Republican governor at that time, and the initiative was highly bipartisan. A similar story applied to the Cleveland Scholarship and Tutoring Program 6 years later, and the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program. The main advocates for the DC OSP were Mayor Anthony Williams, African-American Democrat, Kevin Chavis, who was the chairman of the City Council Committee on Education, African-American Democrat, and Peggy Cooper Kafritz, who was the superintendent of public schools for D.C. at the time, African-American Democrat. So in the local areas where the political leaders are closely in touch with the needs of families, school choice has been very bipartisan. It's only sort of at the national level with national organizations and the national political parties where who are significantly separated from the day-to-day needs of actual families. That's where private school choice has become a partisan issue, but it really isn't, where the rubber hits the road, and that's in actual American communities.
And Patrick, why do you think that the teachers union and the superintendents union are so viscerally opposed to school choice policies?
Well, school choice is a change. It's a change from the system of residential assignment of students to zone public schools. And change always involves, some uncertainty and some concern. But change is always going to be incremental in the United States. These choice programs are always implemented incrementally, oftentimes initially as pilot programs, small scale. Let's see how this works. So none of the changes are dramatic and abrupt, and they're not going to do significant pose these great challenges to the existing system. But still, people, get concerned about change. And the other thing about school choice is when it's expanded, the traditional public school can't take its student body for granted. It may grow, it may decline. And so that it does add a little bit of uncertainty to the lives of public school teachers, public school administrators. But, if they are delivering what parents in their community want for their children, then they have nothing to fear.
Interesting. Okay, well, we have another question that came in.
Yes, and Patrick, either you or Julie, whoever wants to take it. Lisa from Cabot asked, what accountability measures will be in place to make sure parents receiving this tax credit scholarship, the use of the money goes toward legitimate academic services?
Well, that varies, by the program. But there are several different mechanisms. Frequently, the tax credit donation goes into a scholarship organization, and the scholarship organization pays the private school directly. So they just pay the tuition to the private school. So they know exactly where that money is going and that it's being used for the educational expenses of that child.
Yes, and there's also the education savings account model, which has more flexibility but still has some guides. And if you've ever had like a health flexible savings account, then you know how this works. And it's basically there is a defined set of education-related expenses that the money can be used for, including private school tuition, tutoring, textbooks, online courses, those sorts of things. And parents can direct the money out of the account to those types of expenditures. And if they try to spend the money on on some kind of product or service that isn't education related, then it gets flagged by overseers and through audits. So this has been done in 6 states across the United States. Originally, the first state was Arizona, and the problems in terms of improper purchases and things like that are minimal, really minor. And in the few cases where it's happened, it's been, they've caught it very quickly and corrected it.
Excellent. Well, I don't see that we have a whole lot of questions left. So what do we like to do before Valerie closes us out here is each of you spend just a few minutes, if you have any kind of follow-up to any questions or any ideas that hit you that you would like to share with regard to the conversation we had tonight. You have a wealth of knowledge between the two of you, and again, we just appreciate you being here. So, Patrick, if you just want to, say whatever it is that's on your mind that you would share with the folks in the state of Arkansas about school choice broadly or about specific programs, tax credit scholarships, the Succeed Scholarship that we already have, or an ESA program, that would be wonderful.
Sure. I mean, one thing we absolutely know about education is that children are different. They're different in their needs. They're different in their learning styles. They're different in the kind of environment in which they're going to thrive. And so I think without school choice, we just put a tremendous burden on our public school system to be all things for all students, and that's just asking too much. So what school choice allows is it allows different kinds of schools to specialize their approach to serve the needs of different kinds of students. And every parent knows. I mean, I'm a parent of two sons. They're generally grown now, but they were so different. I couldn't believe how different their learning styles were and their educational needs were. And so we ended up putting them in 2 different schools and 2 different education delivery systems, because one was best for one of them and the other was best for the other one. And most families have experienced that, and so school choice really grows out of that very fundamental point, and that is that different kids are going to do better in different kinds of environments, and parents are with them more than anyone else and know them better than anyone else, and so parents should be able to really direct the educational futures of their children.
Excellent. So,
yes.
Funny, one of the things that I heard said, I don't know where it was, but I've repeated it often, is number one, you would never make a school system, whatever it is, a public school system, would never insist that a child who's celiac eat a sandwich for lunch. Nor would they demand that a child that is lactose intolerant drink milk. But day after day, we demand that students who are not fitting or thriving in their zone school stay there, although we know a different environment would work so much better for them and their families. And quite frankly, as you both so aptly said earlier in the conversation, for the state as a whole. So school choice solves, it isn't completely solved, but it answers a lot of the questions that we have with regard to educated workforce, to incarceration rates, to graduation rates, to employment skills and things like that. And from the research that I've read, which is certainly not anything that you guys have read, but it points to all the positives and it being a win-win for parents and teachers, students, and on and on and on, that there's really no negative outside of what you talked about earlier, Patrick, is just the sheer change of what it would do to the one-size-fits-all model that we have stuck with for decades.
Right. And I would just like to point out that we are not, anti-public schools. My son has been in a public school his entire career. And we are blessed to have some public schools that do amazing things for the vast majority of our students. But if we don't have any school choice programs, we're asking public schools to be everything for everybody. And that's simply impossible to do that and to do that well. And so by having school choice, we're recognizing that, students are not cogs. They don't all need the exact same thing. And we allow schools to specialize a bit. And the schools that specialize can attract the students who need those specific skills or those specific programs. And everybody benefits. The students have better educational experiences. The schools are able to do a better job when their students are getting exactly what they need.
And I'll just add to what Julie said, and that is that one of my sons is one of Julie's son's classmates at a public high school. And as soon as I get off this phone, I'm going to sit down with him and help him prepare for his statistics test tomorrow. So I'm an involved parent. What's that, Julie?
I said I can't even spell statistics.
So we are involved public school parents. That's what Julie and I are, who understand that for some parents, different options are going to be more attractive for their family and for their child.
So the overall message of school choice is school choice has really less to do with the school than it does with the student. The student is really the focus of school choice. It becomes a student-centered, student-focused conversation once you start talking about what's best for students, and in particular individual students and individual learning styles and things of that nature. I heard this the other day, and I thought it was great. Nobody gets upset at the guy who drives a pickup truck who's in the construction business, because that's the vehicle he needs. The Mercedes dealership or the Yugo dealership is not offended by a guy that drives a Ford truck. That's not their audience. So I just wonder, why we continue to think about school in this, and I don't even know that this is the right terminology, but the word that comes to mind is monolithic, deal when, everything else now is specialized. The healthcare industry. I mean, when I was a kid, you went to the general practitioner, right? You just went to the doctor. Now you go to, the ear, nose, and throat guy. You don't go to the doctor for an ear infection. You go to the ear, nose, and throat guy. So literally education is this only space where we've decided it has to stay this way, and that the same model we've been doing for centuries is the model that we have to insist on is delivered to each and every one of our kids, even though there's 487,000 K-12 kids in Arkansas. And Patrick, you just have 2, and they're different. And I have 2, and they're different. And Valerie has 3, and hers are different. So I'm going to hand this back over to Valerie, and appreciate you guys so very much for joining us tonight. If your questions didn't get answered, Valerie's going to tell you how to get a hold of us. And we thank all the people that were on the conference line. So, Val?
All right. Well, we do want to thank everyone for joining in and listening and participating in the discussion. Thank you, Patrick and Julie, for being our guests and just giving us some great information and thoughts that you have on this important issue. If you did not get a chance to get your question answered, you can email us at info@thereformalliance.org, and please give us a call, also 501-244-9028, and we'll be glad to get your question answered. Okay? All right.
Also, they can find us on Facebook.
Find us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter.
Find us on Instagram.
Hey,
we got all kinds of things.
Ways.
If you can't find us, you're not looking. So, Patrick, Julie, thank you for your time. We appreciate all your work, and I'm sure we will talk to you in the coming days.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Lori.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Valerie.
All right. Good night, everyone.